I set foot on this campus in 1948 as a 17-year-old young man from Lafayette, Louisiana, bolstered by the great wisdom learned from my parents, neither of whom graduated from high school, but they were as smart as anyone who had completed college, and I can guarantee you that because I've got a lot of PhDs every day in this university. I was full of dreams and more than a little bit of fear, but quickly my fears were allayed and my dreams began to be nurtured by the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, the rest of a caring faculty and staff, as well as my fellow students who shared many of the same dreams and fears. I came to Xavier at the time World War II was ending, and most of the students who were there was older than I. Many were married, had children, and it probably was the greatest time in the world for a 17-year-old to be in college and to be mentored, not only by the faculty, by those servicemen who had fought in World War II. As a student at Xavier, yes, I was challenged to apply a disciplined commitment to my studies, challenged to care about and consider others who in all ways were going to be part of my life, certainly for the rest of my life. My experience as a student shaped my personal ambitions and ideas for what my role could be in a changing world. My faith guided me to apply the gifts of God had blessed me with to serve others. Again, I'm grateful for my parents and the Sisters of the Holy Family who taught me in elementary and in high school and encouraged me to come to Xavier. Here, I met Blanche, my wife, my partner, and a partner of 59 years, counting today. And of course, the mother of my 6 loving children, some of whom you know, and I'm not sure you would use that description. And they were raised on this campus. And I credit God and all of them for the successes I've had and the joy that I've experienced. For nearly 47 years, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to lead this great university. And I've been blessed each day by the inspiration of St. Catherine Drexel and by the commitment of our outstanding faculty, dedicated staff, promising students, loyal alumni, and of course, our Board of Trustees, now being headed by Michael Rue, who has done an extensive job in making us and keeping us where we are and should be. If you've been reading any of the papers you print and the like, you're finding out that not all colleges have been blessed with a board like I have had for all of the years that I've been here. Together we have forged ahead on the noble path to educational achievement blazed by St. Catherine Drexel and her dedicated sisters. As an institution, we've grown stronger in every way, in enrollment, programs of study, campus facilities, the endowment, and in striving ever higher each day. Together, we've created a strong and a sustainable culture of excellence and achievement grounded in our Catholic values. After nearly 47 years, as I've mentioned, I know that the time has come to take the brightly burning torch turned over to me by the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament and pass it on to new leadership. Just 2 days ago, just moments ago, I announced to a university convocation that the Xavier Board of Trustees has accepted my request to retire as president of Xavier University, effective June 30th, 2015. I did so with a passionate confidence and absolute certainty that Xavier is better prepared than ever to continue its educational and spiritual mission and to build on its tradition of excellence. I could not express in words alone my heartfelt thanks and sincerest gratitude for the rewarding opportunities I have been blessed to have had at Xavier, both as a student and as an administrator. I have literally witnessed the incredible commitment of faculty to a mission and to quality of service of generations of trustees, staff, and members of religious orders. Nothing has brought me greater joy than participating in the growth experience of innumerable students who achieve their respective personal and career goals at Xavier as alumni. These men and women have affirmed Xavier's distinction for quality and excellence across the country and around the world. Yes, I want to express special gratitude to my dear wife for 59 years, Blanche, and my children, and I'll call their names so if you see them on the street, keep them straight. Michael, Timmy, David, Kathleen, Patrick, and Christina. Without their love and support and sacrifice, I could not have dedicated my life to serve others. All of those fulfillments of God's given talents were made possible by St. Catherine Drexel, our founder, and her religious order. Her expression of love and passion, I will quote it, wishing good for others and causing it to be done. I want to repeat that. Real love is wishing good for others and causing it to be done, end of quote. This was God's special blessings bestowed on a young lady who would later become a saint. And of course, those blessings flowed to all of her beneficiaries, including all of the people I spoke to today and all of us who intend to continue to work in education. And part of that responsibility is to pass it on to others. Looking back on the past 6 decades and taking stock of where Xavier is today, I'm convinced that this institution will continue to play a role in forging ahead on that noble path first blazed by our founders. Xavier is positioned to soar into a brighter future that will be even greater than its past. I know that Xavier's best days are ahead, and that in the future, Xavier will set ever higher levels of excellence and achievement. Thank you. And now, I'd like to turn it over to my chairman, Mr. Michael Rue, for his expressions.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. Good afternoon, and thank you for delaying your lunch hour for this important announcement that we have for you today. My name is Michael Rue, chairman of the Xavier University Board of Trustees. This morning, the Board of Trustees accepted Dr. Francis's request for retirement effective June 30th, 2015. We did this knowing that his years of service and dedication have firmly positioned Xavier for a very bright future. Moments ago, we held a campus-wide convocation to share the news of Dr. Francis's planned retirement with the Xavier family first, before announcing it publicly. The Board of Trustees wishes Dr. Francis could remain as Xavier's president for at least 50 more years, but I take solace in the realization that he will be forever with us through the institution that he helped shape. Yes, Dr. Francis has led Xavier University to forge ahead on the noble path that was blazed by St. Catherine Drexel. And he has built sustainable momentum over decades that will continue moving Xavier forward far into the future. Guided by his deep Catholic faith, Dr. Francis has unselfishly dedicated his life to service. He exemplifies what it means to be a servant leader and embodies the values upon which Xavier was founded. Spark for Leadership was ignited when he first stepped foot on campus in 1948 as a student on a work scholarship. Since then, Dr. Francis has gone on to achieve greatness. After Xavier, Dr. Francis went on to become the first African American to be admitted to Loyola Law School in 1955. Continuing on his path of service, he was drafted into the United States Army and then worked for the U.S. Attorney General to integrate federal agencies. During the civil rights movement, his leadership and contributions to progress helped shape not only our university, but our city and our country. As a young lawyer, he acted as legal counsel to activists fighting segregation, and later opened the doors of Xavier to house Freedom Riders after the group's bus was bombed in Alabama. Out of these experiences in the civil rights movement, he decided to forego a promising legal practice for a career in education, where he could be of more service. And thus his path brought him back to Xavier. In 1957, he was appointed Dean of Men and rose through the ranks to become the president of the university in 1968. With this appointment, Dr. Francis became the first lay head of Xavier University. So as you can see, Dr. Francis's life has been marked by many firsts. First African American to be admitted to and graduate from Loyola Law School. First lay person to lead this university. First African American on the New Orleans Civil Service Commission. As a true servant leader, Dr. Francis has served on numerous city, state, national boards and commissions. He chaired the American Association of Higher Education in Washington and the Government Affairs Committee for the United Negro College Fund. He led the Louisiana Recovery Authority post-Hurricane Katrina, even though his house had been destroyed. He has been a trusted advisor to mayors, governors, diplomats, and U.S. presidents, to cardinals, bishops, and heads of religious orders. Dr. Francis has received countless awards and honorary degrees. Most noteworthy is the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor, in 2006. As a true servant leader, Dr. Francis has led Xavier University to build on the path blazed by St. Catherine Drexel. He has built sustainable momentum over the decades that will continue moving Xavier forward far into the future. The changes under his leadership between Xavier of 1968 and the Xavier of 2014 are beyond remarkable. Enrollment has more than tripled. The campus has grown from 5 buildings and a collection of houses and Army surplus trailers on one city block to 16 permanent buildings and green spaces on 63 acres. The green roofs of Xavier are well known to all that live in New Orleans. The endowment has grown from under $2 million to over $160 million. Xavier's economic impact has grown to $320 million annually, and Xavier has become one of the area's leading employers. 20,000 students have earned Xavier diplomas. Xavier has received national recognition for outstanding academic achievements, especially in the sciences and pre-medical areas. New programs have been started, including the unique Institute for Black Catholic Studies, Communication Studies, Public Health Sciences, and a doctoral degree in education is slated to begin in fall 2015. I have only scratched the surface of the impact Dr. Francis's leadership has had on Xavier. It is clear that he has left a lasting imprint on our university in every way. While we will miss his daily presence on campus, his smiles, his greetings, his guidance, his inspiration and leadership, we are happy for him as he transitions into a life beyond the presidency. During this school year, Dr. Francis's last as our president, we will work closely with him to ensure that his retirement at the end of the spring semester will be a smooth transition for students, faculty, and the entire Xavier community, of which he will always be the patriarch. There will likely be many questions and much speculation soon about who will be Xavier's next president. The responsibility for this decision rests with the Board of Trustees. I can assure you, though, we will never be able to replicate Dr. Francis. The board will seek to identify someone with similar values, principles, energy, and faith to lead us into the future. Having just approved Dr. Francis's request to retire, our sole focus today and over the next few days is on beginning the celebration of his life and the legacy of the quintessential Xavierite, Norman C. Francis. In your press kits, you have information on the university and Dr. Francis. There is also a copy of a video interview that I had the honor of conducting with Dr. Francis that you are welcome to use in your reporting. Now we would like to open it up for members of the press to ask questions to either me or Dr. Francis before we are whisked away to our next engagement.
I had just closed classes for a whole 2 hours, and they were happy about that. And when the old folks stood up and started clapping, they clapped too, so I couldn't figure out whether or not they were clapping for me that I was leaving or clapping because I had done much for them. I think it was enthusiastically a solemn session. I must confess to you, I've been in a number of big convocations like this one, and there was very little talking, little noise, everything was quiet. I'm not so sure what they expected, and maybe they'll think about it tonight and start crying.
They were disappointed Beyonce didn't show. That was...
You know, for those of us, and there are some of you in here, when the assassination of King took place, and we'd had all these assassinations before, you know, Kennedy's, this assassination was like blowing up the dream. It, I think, dulled our senses. We were in shock. I remember, again, talking to a student body a couple of days afterwards, because I was at Xavier. I had just accepted the presidency, and I accepted really on the day that the announcement was made that he was assassinated. I was in Pennsylvania with the sisters who had asked me to come up to talk after I had agreed to serve. But it's hard to look back at my moving into that role and knowing what was going to happen afterwards. Now, fortunately, and I say fortunately, I associated with the law firm that represented CORE, Collins, Douglas, and Eli. I was of counsel. So I spent my evenings when I wasn't at Xavier and the rest with them, negotiating. I mean, the fact that we housed the Freedom Riders right after the bombing in Bessemer came because of my association with CORE. Rudy Lombard, who was the president of the student body at the time, and Vincent Rue had come to me before and said, we're planning a freedom ride. And I said, what's a freedom ride? Say, well, we're going to have people ride on the buses, trailway buses across state lines, and they're going to sit wherever they want to sit. And I looked in my office. I looked at them and said, you crazy? I said, it'll never get to New Orleans. And they looked at me and said, now, you old fogey. That's the problem with you old fogey. Now, I wasn't but 6 years older than they, really. But I'm like a father, you know, say, wait, be careful. And sure enough, they came into my office after it was over with and said, well, okay, all right, you were right this time, but we need your help. I said, what do you need me for? They said, we need rooms for the Freedom Riders who were bombed out because they have vowed to come to New Orleans whether they have to crawl. And the word was out on the street, so to speak, that wherever the Freedom Riders landed for a place to stay, they were going to get bombed too. So this wasn't a light decision I had to make, although I wasn't president at the time. I was executive vice president. And so I went into the president, the dear nun, and said, here's what we got. And she said, well, what do you think? And I quoted, as I said in my speech this morning, remember the little baby in the inn? No room in the inn? I said, we're a Catholic school. We got to open up the dorm, and we did. And as I said this morning, to see those group of people, I stood on those steps, coming out of those cars, blooded, it was quite a sight. But the point I'm making is that I was able to participate in the civil rights movement. I never wanted headlines and all the rest. I remember negotiating when the boycotts were on Canal Street and the rest. I was one of the team that negotiated with the lawyers for the stores to, say, okay, let's get this straight and so forth. Money is green, and we need to get it. And part of that was very helpful. I'll grant you, we had demonstrations, and rightly we should have. I'm going further than I want to go, but I'll tell you the story about Rudy Lombard. Rudy Lombard was the leader of the band, so they sat on Canal Street, they all got arrested, put in jail. Now, Rudy Lombard was a senior. He had already gotten a total fellowship to Cornell's urban studies, PhD studies. And one of the guys who had gotten out came to my office and said, I said, where's Rudy? He said, Rudy's in jail. I said, what's Rudy doing in jail? He says, he's not leaving until everybody leaves. I said, well, everybody doesn't have a scholarship to Cornell, so I'm going down there. And I did, and as fortuitous, the jailer, there said, they all knew me as Dean. I said, Dean, what do you want? I said, I've come to see Rudy Lombard. He said, I'm just so sorry, I can't let you go down there. I said, why not? He said, you got to be a lawyer to go down there. I said, this is your lucky day. And so I went down, got Rudy. I said, Rudy, you coming out with me right now. I said, Xavier's got a rule that if you miss 3 classes, you get a gig and you fail the class. You're not failing any classes. You're going to Cornell. But my point is, I was able to do things because of my legal background and be in it and help here or there. So that was a tough time. That was a tough time. The last thing I'll say, he mentioned about the U.S. Attorney, and I think it's a story, it ought to be told. I get a call, there's a picture that we saw with 2 guys who was doing the recruiting in the 60s. The government started recruiting African Americans. President Kennedy had said, if you're going to get government contracts, you got to start integrating. Well, Robert Kennedy, on the advice of his brother, went down to Birmingham, Alabama, and talked to Bull Connor. And he said to Bull Connor, he said, Mr. Connor, when are y'all going to start hiring Negroes above the mop and broom level in the state of Alabama? And Bull Connor looked at him and said, Mr. Kennedy, I said, you from Boston, huh? He says, we are going to hire Negroes above the mop and broom level the day the federal government does. He didn't know that the same people who ran the federal government, the same guys who ran the state government. And so 4 of us were asked to go to Birmingham. And I got 4 cities to integrate federal agencies. Now, anybody knows the FHA? That was the worst agency in the United States. I got that one, Birmingham. Get to Birmingham. I stayed in little motel that had been bombed 2 months before and 3 weeks before those 3 little girls down the street. Now, I'm in Birmingham in the summer of 1963, August. I go to the regional office, walk in this beautiful building, and the man didn't let me get to his office. He came down those gorgeous stairs, and he said to me, I know who you are. Oh, yeah, I know who you are. He said, but I want to tell you before you do anything else, we don't have any jobs here. I looked at him. Now I'm thinking, I'm here on orders of the President of the United States and the U.S. Attorney General in a federal building at the FHA, and you telling me we don't have any jobs. I looked at him and I said, you will when I leave. And then I said to myself, let me get out of here. My wife is doing as well as anybody who has the disease that she has, is Alzheimer's. It is difficult, and it's difficult because there's no cure. It doesn't get better, but it's touching. And I say that for those of you who knew my wife, and My wife taught here at Xavier, and she's Xavier all the way, graduated from Xavier. Went to basketball games, the girls' basketball games. If a girl twisted her ankle on the floor, before the manager could get to pick her up or bring her to the room, my wife was in the room waiting for the girl. She had this affection for people and love and so forth. And it's difficult to see someone who can't do that anymore. One of the great voices, I'd go to Mass, and the people sitting in front of us, when they left church, they'd turn around and say to my wife, "You got a great voice." And she can sing all those old songs. Can't sing those songs anymore. She can listen to them, but she can't sing them. It's tough. It's tough. But if you have a deep feeling and appreciation of what that life has been, it's so much that it flows over till eternity. And I certainly I have accepted. I think the family has, but it's difficult. But she's not here today.
Well, as you can imagine, Dr. Francis is part of the DNA of this university. I think for most of us, it's like having your left arm cut off and then your right arm cut off, and realize that you've just lost an important part of your being. But we still, the being exists, and this. He's left this school in wonderful condition, and I think, aside from feeling a sense of loss, there's a sense of great challenge, recognizing how difficult it's going to be to replace someone who will have been here as the leader of the university for 47 years. You can imagine. I don't think there's a person that works on this campus. I don't think there's a person on this campus that doesn't know a time when Dr. Norman C. Francis hasn't been president.
You know, let me answer it this way. There's no good time to die. And really, there's no good time to leave. And whenever you leave, somebody said, "Why don't you stay another year, 2 years?" I told him, if he had said to me, 2 more years. Once you've made that decision, and as I said earlier, I thought about it, but not long. You just got to know when it's time to go. Now, I really would have liked to have left before Katrina, and I could have, and I would have still have had a long legacy, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave, and I knew I couldn't leave, not just because who I was, but I knew that Xavier wasn't ready to give up to a hurricane, and that I had people. We had 80 people who brought us back in 4.5 months. 75% of them had lost their homes. Their homes were behind them, and they were 4 months in Grand Coteau working to put Xavier back together. And that was not easy. We did it in 4.5 months. And at the first meeting of a group in the little Holiday Inn in Grand Coteau, I had about 10 of my staff people. They came in. I don't know how they got there, but they came in. And the first question they asked me, said, "Mr. President, when are we coming back?" Hey, you know, fast talk as I am. I said, "We're coming back on January the 17th. Now, there was somebody in the back of the room. I'm not going to call a name. You know who he is. But way in the back of the room, I couldn't hear. Turned and his buddy who was on the staff and said, "This guy's out of his mind." I didn't learn about it for a year later, because he wouldn't have had a job. But the point is, and I don't know why I chose January 17th, because that was the start of the second semester, and I knew we could put a whole year in from January to August. And as some of you may know, who was the commencement speaker? Barack Obama. Gave the greatest speech you ever want to hear for a group coming back and the like. But there's something about adrenaline. There's something about knowing when it's time to make a decision and a time to leave. I can think of a lot of things, you know, being with the Pope and walking down the steps in the quadrangle when the Secret Service told me, "You brought him out there. Now, when it's all over with, you bring him back to the same door. And when it was all over with, nobody moved. So I figured, well, you know, I'm the president. I brought him here. I stood up, and he got to me before I made the first step. And there was a high area, like 6 steps you had to go down. I took the first one, the second one, and he got close enough to me and said, let's go to the front row. Now, this is the Pope, and there are these Secret Service men waiting for me to bring him back. And I said to myself, man, this is the Pope. And I went right to the front row. He followed me to the front row. Now, what was good about that, and that wasn't my best moment, but my point is, here, and I'd met him before a couple of times, here's the Pope, you know, coming down and telling him like you would have told me, hey, man, let's go down the front row. Telling me, I'm with you, you go, I'm going with you. And I made the right decision, you know, because those Secret Service men would have lost their job. And I brought him back to that. But my greatest moments, are on commencement day. And I can't tell you the pride and joy that I've had those 47 years, and what is it? Somebody did the calculation, 26,000 degrees. Watching, as you know how commencements go, watching with a diploma in my hand and looking at that next student who's standing on the top of that step, knowing that I've got that diploma, and to look at their faces like saying, oh my God, I've worked 4 years, 5 years, we've sacrificed, and here in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to get from this man that diploma. It's an amazing sight, and it's so fulfilling that you are at the day where somebody has spent all their lives getting there, and there they are. That, for me, has kept me going. Now, there have been a lot of other times, too, and it was to watch students that I watch every day mature in a 4 and a 5 year time and get a degree and then go on some of the great things that they've done. A little young lady stopped me yesterday, and that happens all the time, and she just bubbling and walking on clouds. I said, well, what's going on? She says, I have just come back from my internship and the research that I'm doing, and he's going to tell you what the research was. He asked her to repeat what it was, and she was doing some amazing research. Couldn't be no more than 20 years of age, and seeing how happy she was. She had been, I forget what the university was that she did her research in, but to see that, see him right now walking on that campus and see him 4 years later, it's amazing. I mean, it's the greatest job you could have, really, as long as you don't let it get to your head, you know. And for me, I wouldn't have traded it. My dad, who, as I told you, didn't graduate in high school, was a barber. And remember now, this is separate but equal days. And his son is now in law school, integrated law school. He's going to be arguing cases before judges who went to law school with him. And my dad was a very practical guy. He figured, well, if you stand before the judge can't say to you, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, I got it from the same place you got it. That's the way my father thought. He just knew I was going to be a millionaire lawyer. Go back to that little town. They didn't have a lawyer there for 10 years after graduating law school. I wouldn't be here, of course. And I tell this story, and I'll tell it to you, and you can end this. My daddy went to his grave, never forgiving me for not practicing law. You got to think of a man who said, look here, got this lawyer. He thought a lot about lawyers. I could have told him a little bit about lawyers, but any event, he went to his grave never forgiving me. But I also had a brother, my older brother. My brother was the 4th black bishop of the Catholic Church, and my my mother and father were very religious. So now he's got this lawyer over here who doesn't have any sense, goes to the biggest nonprofit group in the world, a poor black college, and here I got a son who's a black Catholic bishop. So he went to his death with a bishop, not a lawyer. I would hope that when it's written, is that I made a difference for young people who had dreams that never thought they would get fulfilled. And that somehow both my background and where I had come from, which I never forgot from whence I had come, and what was going to be required to be what you want to be, if they were to read that story and see that you can make your dreams if you work at them. And I put that sentence in there about my parents. I learned almost everything I needed to know about values and about treating people to two people who never graduated from high school. And I can tell you, they were as smart as anybody I have on this campus in terms of life, living life, knowing. And it's ingrained in me, respect yourself, respect other people, know who you are, and never talk about people when you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's like saying, don't be around talking about people, and you don't have to be disagreeable when you disagree with somebody. And I gotta tell you, it's just natural to me. If you've been around here with me for 47 years, the gardeners, men working, they see me, I shake hands with them, I talk about them. I shine shoes on the main street of my little town. And I can tell you, I learned more about the street than Carter has liver pills. I could tell when a person sat on the chair to have their shoes shine. I was in high school, whether they were going to give me a tip or not. And I could tell almost who they were by how they treated me. Now you got to remember that, how they treated me. I was shining shoes, and I was below them. But there were those who talked to me, asked me questions. We talked about football. Those were the true guys. It's the others who looked at me down and said, oh, hurry up and get that done. Norman.
Dr. Francis, you are understandably a linchpin in the civil rights movement in the 60s. How do you compare what happened in the 60s to what's happening now with the civil rights movement in places like Ferguson, Missouri, where police officers are accused of violating civil rights and unarmed violence?
Norman, I never thought that at 83 years of age, starting as I did and what I went through, civil rights movement, that I'd see the country be in as combobulated a state as it is today. All of the things that we fought for, all of the things we believed in, all the things we preached about, respecting people and doing things alike, it disturbs me. It disturbs me. I don't know if I'd have the energy to start all over again, which we may have to do. And all the things I just said about what I learned early in life and the rest, it's hard to imagine. Now, people living through it now don't understand those sayings, if you don't know the past, you're bound to repeat it. We're on that road. We are on that road. And how in a security force, police force, and the rest, you can carry the weapons you carry and use them in a sense to put fear in people, and put the fear even before they know you or you know them. It's mind-boggling. It's the sort of thing that, yes, I did say when I was young, I wanted to be a lawyer. Never thought I would, be frank with you. And they said, what kind of lawyer you want to be? I said, I want to be the district attorney. Why you want to do this? Because I want to put in jail all of the folks who get arrested, but the district attorney does not accept the charges and so forth. Well, you have more people out of jail than should be. We've got enough people in jail, Norman. But my point is, to answer your question, we are in difficult times. I honestly believe that. And we have got to close the gap in all of the quality of life issues, all of them. Education, health, jobs, housing, you name them. And the stats are all there. The playing field is not level. The disparities are not closed. And why I stayed as long as I did at Xavier was to close those gaps. And we have closed the gaps from what we have done, and more than we should in sense of being in our side. But the policy issues that are before us now is whether or not we're going to fully understand the difference between equal and equity. Equal and equity. You can go on the street right now and you ask anybody, tell me the difference between equal and equity. Well, they're the same thing. No, they're not the same thing. And if we believe that every child and every student should have a full glass of educational water, and we go about saying we're going to pour all the glasses equally, you know, I know that those glasses are not equal. They are not full. So how are you going to pour the water? Oh, pour it equally. Well, if you pour equal amounts of water in unequal glasses, the glasses remain unequal. How you got to pour it? You got to pour the water equitably. You drink a lot of water when you go to dentist. You drink all of your water. So if the waiter they said, let's go pour the water so everybody has a full glass of water, you will get a full glass of water. You drunk half of your glass of water, you get a half a glass. Now, if you're going to pour it just equally, you still are going to be in trouble, and you're never going to get a full glass. My only point is, until America understands that you got to distribute the resources you have in all of the quality of life issues that are not, quote, equal, equitably. Now, that doesn't mean taking water out of his glass, your brother-in-law's glass, to give to you. We got enough water to pour everybody a full glass. That's fundamental.